President Trump was asked about all this yesterday. Here's what he had to say publicly at the White House.
I wish the Democrats could have done this a lot sooner because they had this information for many months and they shouldn't have waited till literally the last days. They should have done it a lot sooner. But with all of that being said, we want to go through the process. One thing I will say is that, as I understand it, Judge Kavanaugh spent quite a bit of time with Senator Feinstein, and it wasn't even brought up at that meeting, and she had this information. So you would have thought certainly that she would have brought it up at the meeting, not wait till everything's finished and then have to start a process all over again. But with all of it being said, we want to go through a full process. I have great confidence in the U.S. Senate and in their procedures and what they're doing, and I think that's probably what they're going to do. They'll go through a process and hear everybody out. I think it's important. I believe they think it's important. I want him to go in at the absolute highest level, and I think to do that, you have to go through this. If it takes a little delay, it'll take a little delay. It shouldn't certainly be very much.
Do you know if he's offered to withdraw from the process? Has he offered to withdraw?
Next question. What a ridiculous question that is.
Do you think his passport confirmation?
Say it.
Do you think his passport confirmation is on track?
Oh, I think he's on track, yeah. I mean, I think he's very much on track. If they delay it a little bit just to make sure everybody's happy, they want to be happy. I can tell you, the Republican senators want to be 100% happy themselves.
Wow.
Wow, that made sense.
Well, yeah, little restraint there, Willie. I mean, his staff told him to be show a little bit of restraint, and he listened to him for some reason.
On the sliding scale of Trump being measured, that was pretty measured for Donald Trump, saying there's a process. Confused. If we have to delay the process, I'm okay with that. Yeah. But what we're hearing, despite that vocal support, two Trump confidants underscoring to the Washington Post the president's history of self-centered calculations in the middle of political tumult. Quote, he's going to do what's best for Trump, said one of them. The president thinks it's rough for Kavanaugh, and he'd decry the process as disgusting if he withdraws, but he would nominate a carbon copy of Kavanaugh in a second if he goes down. So I guess, Joe, the argument from some conservatives at this point is if we have to cast aside Brett Kavanaugh, we'll push somebody in just as conservative, if not more conservative, who doesn't have this problem that he's looking at now.
Well, that's what Donald Trump's thinking. He doesn't care about Brett Kavanaugh. Right. In fact, Brett Kavanaugh is a surprise choice because he's been a member of the Washington establishment for decades. He is the Bush-Washington establishment, but he just so happened to write a law review article in 2009 that said the president of the United States can't be indicted, should not be indicted. So he wanted him for that reason. But you saw him. It doesn't seem like he's taking this too personally. He knows that he'll just get somebody else on the original Federalist Society list.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen before, Mika, when he's adamant about something, when he wants something, he will insult the opponent. He will go out to bat for this guy. And he didn't really do that yesterday in the way he's done in the past, which lends some credence to that Washington Post reporting that he may be willing, if this gets too hot, to push Kavanaugh to the side.
Very interesting reaction, and so much more to cover in an unprecedented move. President Trump is using the power of his office to order the Director of National Intelligence and the Justice Department to immediately declassify materials in the ongoing investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. The move relates to about 20 pages of a secret court order to monitor campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page and demands the release of related interviews with Justice Department official Bruce Orr, an expert on Russian organized crime, who had conversations with the author of the dossier alleging connections between the Kremlin and Trump associates. President Trump also ordered the release of unredacted text messages of former DOJ and FBI officials whom he regularly criticizes on Twitter: James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, as well as Orr. The White House said the order was made at the request of a number of committees of Congress and for reasons of transparency. The Justice Department said it has begun the declassification review process to ensure the safety of national security interests. But a U.S. official with direct knowledge told NBC News that the agencies would not be able to conduct a damage assessment on the text messages because there are too many of them. Joe.
Matt, let me bring in right now Matt Miller. Matt, you have, first of all, of course, the FBI not wanting this released. The Justice Department hasn't wanted it released. The Director of National Intelligence didn't want it released. You've got sources and methods that are highly likely to be exposed, which the President was warned about, the Commander-in-Chief was warned about. And you have one of the more highly classified programs in the United States of America, the FISA courts, that now we're going to allow our enemies to see exactly how we do things as it pertains to the FISA court. Most FISA judges won't even let you know that they're a FISA judge. It's been that secret for that long. Obviously, all these security concerns mean absolutely nothing to Donald J. Trump.
You know, Joe, it is hard to overstate what an abuse of power this is by the president. He really is taking the powers of his office, the powers of the presidency, and using them to advance his personal interests, which he defines as continuing this war against the intelligence community, this war against the FBI, rather than protect the national interest. And, you know, that statement you saw from the Justice Department about how they're going to go through the declassification review now, they already did that with respect to the Carter Page FISA application. It was released in January after he ordered it declassified, and they went through a review and held back the information they thought was most secretive, and they really needed to keep classified to protect sources and methods. The president has now ordered that material completely released, and if you look through the application, the pages he's ordered, there are entire pages that are blanked out. There are clear references to sources. There are references to actions inside Russia, and he just doesn't care at all about jeopardizing anything related to that ongoing investigation. And I will say on top of that, to release the FBI interviews with Bruce Orr in the middle of an investigation is unprecedented. I cannot remember a single time when the Justice Department in the middle of an investigation has released those kind of interviews. Those interview summaries. It is just an absolute breach with practice for no purpose but then to try to discredit the investigation into the president and his campaign.
So, Matt, talk about the politics of this aside. What does this mean in practical terms for the intelligence agencies? Because I'm thinking if I'm in the FBI and I know that all of this material is about to be released, this must have some downstream impact on my ability to recruit informants, say, who I need to do some other case at some later date, because they're going to be worried, well, hey, look, if this is the precedent that's just been set, my information could come out too at a later date.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the FISA application, one of the biggest things is Chris Steele, obviously. It relates to a lot of the application relates to the interviews the FBI did with Chris Steele, the information that he supplied. Other Chris Steeles around the country or around the world are going to look at this and say, why would I come cooperate with American law enforcement, with American intelligence services? They always tell me they will protect me. That's what our law enforcement agents do. It's what our intelligence agents do. They say, we will protect you. We will protect your confidentiality. We will never let this information become public. And now you see not just leaking out. It's one thing when this kind of information leaks out. That is enough of a problem when it happens. The President of the United States ordering it publicly released just to attack the intelligence community because he sees it help his personal interests will have such a downstream effect. And I'll say it's also true with respect to the other part of this. He's releasing the text messages of 4 former FBI officials, a current DOJ official. Think about what that does to the morale of people inside the Justice Department to see career officials retaliated against just because they did their job.
Matt,
great point.
If it were not for Judge Kavanaugh's situation, this would obviously be the lead story on every network news program and in every newspaper in America. We will look at these, if they are indeed released, these unredacted text messages and other elements that will be released, according to the president. We will read them here in the United States with a different kind of eye than people in Moscow and Tehran and Tel Aviv and in Pakistan and Afghanistan will read them. Talk about the danger of trained foreign eyes looking at what is about to be released.
You know, you make a great point, Mike. There are only two entities who benefit from the release of this information. The president's legal defense team and foreign intelligence services, especially the Russian intelligence service. If you look at the Carter Page FISA application, there are references all throughout it, most of them redacted, but you can see by the words around it what the underlying information is, to actions and activities inside Russia. If those blacked out sections are now made public, the American public is not just going to know, but the Russian intelligence service is going to know exactly what our intelligence services took to the most secretive court in the land with relation to ongoing activities and operations in Russia. Foreign intelligence services will be able to find out not just the specifics, and the Russians will care very much about the specifics, but other intelligence services will be able to see how we work, how our most secretive operations are put together, how we work sources, the methods that intelligence services use, and they will be able to incorporate that into trying to kind of sniff out and detect and prevent American intelligence operations in the future.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.